You think you know your family until the day they treat you like a stranger. In Silver Creek, a quiet mountain town where everyone knows everyone, 9-year-old Mary Hollister has spent her entire life supporting her daughter and son-in-law. But one crisp autumn afternoon, a single cold sentence shattered everything she believed about love, loyalty, and family. And what she discovered next, the secret her late husband left behind, would change her life forever. This is her quiet comeback. If this kind of story speaks to you, feel free to subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Now, let's begin. Mary Hollister never considered herself an extraordinary woman. In the quiet mountain town of Silver Creek, she was simply Mary, the widow who tended the wildflowers by her porch every morning, waved at passing neighbors, and carried her grocery bags with the stubborn pride of someone who refused to be treated as fragile. At 69, Mary had settled into a rhythm life often gives the elderly: soft mornings, slow afternoons, and evenings filled with the kind of silence only small towns can hold. After losing her husband Henry 3 years earlier, she built her days around routine just to keep the loneliness from sneaking in. But despite her age, despite the aching joints and the thinning hair, Mary still felt capable of giving. And that was her downfall, because Mary Hollister gave until there was nothing left to give. Her daughter Diane and son-in-law Mark were living proof of that. They lived just 15 minutes down the road in a 2-story house Mary practically bought for them. When the roof leaked, Mary paid for repairs. When the car broke, she covered the bill. When Mark's business idea collapsed for the 3rd time, she drained another small portion of her retirement savings to make sure they didn't lose their home. And when Diane called crying about daycare expenses, Mary stepped in again, because what mother doesn't want to help her own child? Silver Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. So when Mary walked into the grocery store with empty pockets because she had transferred her money to help Diane last week, the cashier didn't ask questions. The town knew Mary's heart was too big for her own good. But then came the afternoon that cracked something inside her. It started with a simple question, harmless, innocent, almost cheerful. Mary had been standing in Diane's freshly painted kitchen, admiring how the new cabinets gleamed in the sunlight, cabinets she had paid for. The scent of cinnamon rolls filled the air, and for a moment, Mary felt like life was peaceful again. "So," she asked, smiling, "when is the housewarming party?" She expected Diane to grin, maybe hug her like she used to, maybe even say, "Thank you, Mom. We couldn't have done this without you." Instead, Diana's expression stiffened like a curtain being pulled shut. "Oh," she said flatly. "It's this weekend." Mary blinked. "This weekend? Why didn't you tell me?" Diane exchanged a quick glance with Mark. He folded his arms, leaning back against the counter with the self-important air of a man who enjoyed knowing something you didn't. Then Diane delivered the sentence that sliced through Mary's chest like cold metal. "It's just for, well, family only." Mary felt the room tilt. For a moment, she couldn't even breathe. "Family?" she managed to whisper. "But I am family." Diane looked away. Mark didn't. "Mom," he said, voice dripping with condescension, "we want a fresh start." A new energy. Younger guests. "It's nothing personal. Nothing personal." The words stabbed and twisted. Mary stood there, hands trembling, staring at her daughter, the girl she once carried through midnight fevers, the girl whose college tuition she paid, the girl she supported through every heartbreak. And now, apparently, she wasn't modern enough to attend a party in the home she helped build. Mary walked out quietly that day, careful not to let the tears fall until she was alone. Silver Creek's autumn wind felt colder than usual. But that wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. A few days later, Mark arrived at Mary's house with a man in a suit, the kind of man who walks like he owns whatever ground his shoes touch. "Mary," Mark said, clearing his throat like he was about to deliver good news. "This is Mr. Collins. Hez here to help you with something important." "Mr.?" Collins smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "We've prepared a simple document for you, Mrs. Hollister. A routine asset management transfer. Just sign at the bottom." Mary frowned. "Transfer? Transfer what?" "Your property," Collins said smoothly. "Diane and Mark will manage your finances for you. It's best for someone your age." Mary straightened her back. "I manage my own finances just fine." Mark's jaw tightened. "Mom, let's not make this difficult. Why would I sign my house over to you?" Mary demanded. For your safety? Collins replied too quickly. Something icy trickled down her spine. That's when she noticed it, a detail she almost missed. Collins wasn't holding a blank form. He was holding paperwork, already filed copies stamped by the courthouse, documents that shouldn't exist unless someone had submitted something behind her back. What have you done? Mary whispered. Mark stepped closer, voice low and threatening. Mom, sign the papers. Don't embarrass yourself. But Mary, timid, gentle, Mary surprised even herself. No. Collins exhaled sharply. Well then, we may need to involve other parties. 2 days later, the rumors began. Mrs. Hollister is forgetting things. Mary is getting confused. Poor woman, she's losing it. Neighbors looked at her differently. Even the grocery cashier asked if she needed help remembering her PIN number, something she had never struggled with. Her dignity was being stripped one whisper at a time. But Silver Creek hadn't taken everything from Mary. Not yet. One cold evening, while searching her barn for an old toolbox, Mary's foot hit something under a loose plank, a wooden box, dusty, old, and familiar. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Henry's handwriting was carved into the lid. Inside the barn's dim light, Mary knelt down and pulled the box out with trembling hands. There was a key tied to the handle, a note, and Henry's wedding band, the one he never took off. Mary's breath quivered. She slipped the key into the lock. It clicked. Inside were legal documents, a sealed envelope, bank records, and a leather-bound notebook. The first page read, Mary, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. The mystery had only begun, and the truth inside that box would shatter everything she thought she knew about her daughter and her own past. Mary stood in her silent kitchen the morning after the housewarming revelation, trying to make sense of the ache that clung to her like a second skin. The sunlight coming through the window felt colder than usual, as if even the day itself hesitated to touch her. She moved mechanically, filling the kettle, setting it on the stove, reaching for the mug with the little bluebird Henry once said reminded him of her. Every small motion pushed her deeper into the reality she didn't want to face. Her daughter had excluded her. Not by accident, not because she forgot, but intentionally, deliberately, cruelly. And the wound wasn't just fresh, it was deep. Mary sat at the kitchen table and tried to sip her tea, but it tasted like metal. Her hands trembled. Diane's words family only still echoed through her mind, tearing open places she thought time had already healed. The phone rang. The sound jolted through the house, sharp and invasive. She hesitated, breath stuck in her throat. When she finally picked up, her voice cracked. Hello? Mom? Diane's voice, soft but distant. Too distant. I'm coming over. Mark and I need to talk to you. A chill crawled up Mary's spine. Nothing about her daughter's tone felt normal. Is everything all right? Mary asked. A pause. Too long. We'll talk when we get there. The call ended. Mary stared at the silent phone in her hand, dread blooming in her chest. 30 minutes later, a dark SUV pulled into her driveway. Mark stepped out first, wearing a stiff suit like he was heading into a negotiation rather than visiting family. Diane followed, eyes red as if she had cried, or as if she wanted Mary to think she had. They didn't knock. They walked in. Mom, sit down, Diane said. Mary stayed standing, gripping the back of her chair for strength. What is this about? Mark opened a leather folder and slid a stack of papers across the table. We've been talking, he said, seating himself like he owned the place. And we think it's time you stop living alone. Mary's pulse spiked. What? You're almost 70, Mark said flatly. It's not safe. And, well, we've heard some things. What things? Mary demanded, her voice sharp. Diane swallowed. Mom, the neighbors said, you've been forgetting things, mixing up dates, leaving the stove on. Mary staggered back a step. That's not true. Mark leaned forward. Your age is catching up to you, Mary. You need help, our help. Mary glared at him. You don't care if I'm safe. You care about what I own. His expression shifted, not enough to look guilty, but enough to confirm she was right. He pushed the papers toward her again. This grants us temporary oversight of your house and finances, just to protect you. I don't need protecting, Mary whispered. Mark's eyes hardened. Sign it. Mary shook her head, breath shallow. I won't. Mom, please, Diane pleaded. Don't make this harder. We're trying to keep you from losing everything. I am losing everything, Mary said quietly. And it's happening right now. Emotion tightened her throat. This moment was the beginning of something she hadn't wanted to believe. Her daughter was taking sides with a man who saw her as nothing but a liability with a house attached. Diane stepped closer. Mom, I don't want to do this. But you're not thinking clearly anymore. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years, Mary replied. Mark exhaled like he was bored. Enough, he said. We brought someone. He gestured toward the door. A woman in scrubs entered, nervous, eyes darting. A local nurse. Not one Mary recognized. This is Sarah, Mark announced. She's seen signs of cognitive decline. Mary stiffened. I've never met you. Sarah's voice wavered. We, spoke at the pharmacy. No, Mary said firmly. We did not. Sarah looked at Diane with panic, silently begging for direction. Diane gave a tiny nod, and Sarah lied. You were confused about your medication, she said, voice barely audible. You didn't know the dosage, and you said you couldn't remember when Henry passed away. Mary's stomach dropped. Her grief, her deepest wound, twisted into a weapon used against her. Tears flooded her eyes, not just from hurt, but from the betrayal that pressed down on her like a physical weight. Diane stood behind Mark, avoiding her gaze, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Not once did she step forward to defend her own mother. Mary steadied herself. Henry died 3 years ago. October. A Tuesday morning. I remember every detail. I don't forget him. Mark rolled his eyes. A lot of elderly people think that. Something inside Mary snapped. I said no, she repeated, voice trembling with anger and heartbreak. You won't take my home. You won't take my dignity. And you will not speak for me. Mark stood abruptly. Well, see what the court thinks, he snapped. Declining mental state, poor judgment, refusal of care. We have witnesses. Witnesses, plural. This wasn't the beginning of a concern. This was the beginning of a plan. And Mary understood with brutal clarity that they had been setting her up for months. Diane reached out as if to touch her arm, but Mary flinched. Mom, we're doing what's best. No, Mary whispered. You're doing what's easiest. Mark closed his folder and nodded to Sarah, who slipped out quickly, guilt written all over her face. Diane lingered a moment longer. If you need anything, she said softly, call me. Mary didn't answer. She watched them leave, the SUV disappearing down the road, carrying with it the last fragments of the family she thought she had. The silence in the house felt suffocating that evening. Mary walked through each room slowly, touching the walls Henry once painted, the chair where he used to sit and read, the old radio he repaired every winter. Every memory felt like a goodbye. Outside, the wind stirred the trees like whispers, whispers that seemed to say she needed to be stronger than she'd ever been. She sat on the edge of her bed, clutching Henry's old flannel shirt to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She cried for her daughter, for the love that had eroded without her noticing. She cried for the years she gave away without being asked. She cried for the dignity that almost slipped from her hands today. And somewhere in the middle of her grief, something shifted. A spark, a thought, a question. Why did Mark bring documents already stamped? How did a nurse she never met suddenly appear? Why did Diane look terrified the whole time? Something was wrong, deeply, unmistakably wrong. Mary stood up. For the first time in months, her hands stopped shaking. She went to the barn, Henry's barn. The place he spent his last years tinkering, restoring old tools, always keeping busy. The boards creaked under her weight as she stepped inside, the smell of old cedar filling her lungs. She pulled the string to turn on the single dangling light bulb. It flickered weakly. She scanned the shelves, the workbench, the old tool chests. Nothing seemed out of place, until she noticed a plank in the floor slightly lifted just enough to catch the eye of someone who had spent decades loving the man who installed it. Mary knelt, pulled the plank. And there it was. The wooden box. Henry's handwriting carved into it, her breath hitched, her heartbeat roared in her ears. She retrieved the box, carrying it inside with trembling hands. She sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had been humiliated hours before. She untied the key Henry had secured to the box. Her pulse quickened. She turned the lock. Click. Inside lay documents sealed, stamped, protected. A notebook, an envelope addressed in Henry's handwriting. She opened the notebook first, and the very first line shattered the world she thought she knew. "Mary, if they've turned on you, it means I was right about them." Her vision blurred with tears. Henry knew. He knew this day would come, and he had prepared for it. The woman they tried to silence was no longer alone. She had truth. She had evidence. She had Henry watching over her in the only way he still could. She wiped her cheeks and took a steady breath. Tonight, Mary Hollister broke. Tomorrow, she would fight. Mary sat at her kitchen table long after midnight, the wooden box still open in front of her. Every document inside felt heavier than it should: legal papers, bank slips, stamped forms she never knew existed. And Henry's handwriting, steady and careful, appeared again and again, like the voice of a man who had predicted the moment she now found herself in. But one line in his notebook kept echoing in her mind: "If they've turned on you, Mary, it means the truth is finally surfacing." She traced the ink with trembling fingers. Henry always wrote as though he knew what storms were coming. For the first time since his death, Mary felt him again, not as a memory, but as a presence guiding her somewhere she wasn't ready to go. Yet she had no choice now. The betrayal had already begun, and what she held in this box might be her only way out. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she waited for dawn, watching as Silver Creek softened under the pale light. The town looked peaceful from her window, a mountain stillness that would fool anyone into believing danger couldn't reach this far. But it had found her, and it wasn't finished. Mary gathered every document and placed them neatly back into the box, locking it as Henry had. Then she grabbed her coat and keys. Her heart thudded with a mixture of fear and resolve. She needed to see someone who could tell her what this all meant, someone she could trust. There were not many of those left. Except one: Samuel Carter, Henry's closest friend. She drove the short road to Samuel's cabin, nestled just beyond the creek. Smoke curled from his chimney, and the old hound dog raised its head as she approached. Samuel opened the door before she could knock. "Mary," he said quietly, "you look like you've seen a ghost." "Something close," she whispered. Samuel frowned as she pushed the box into his hands. "What's this?" "Henry," she said. "It's all Henry." He set the box on the table, opened it slowly, and Mary watched his expression shift from curiosity to shock, to something darker, something like dread. "Good Lord," Samuel breathed. "He told me once he was worried, but I didn't know he meant this." "What is it, Samuel? Why would Henry hide all this from me?" Samuel pressed his fingers to his temple. "Because he knew Mark wasn't just reckless. Has been involved with the wrong kind of people, Mary. People Henry discovered were using him." Her stomach dropped. "Using Mark?" Samuel nodded. "They needed someone desperate. Someone foolish with money. Henry tried to warn Diane, but she didn't want to hear it. So he started collecting everything: proof, dates, transfers, anything that showed Mark's trail." Mary felt the room close in. "So all of this, it isn't just about my house." "No," Samuel said. "It's bigger, much bigger." She swallowed hard. "Then what do I do?" Samuel looked at her with that steady gaze. "Henry once called the only real compass in Silver Creek. You take this to a lawyer, someone strong, someone clean." Mary hesitated. "Would they even believe me? After everything Mark and Diane have already told the town? Bring them the truth," Samuel said. Truth has a way of speaking louder, but his tone carried a warning. "But once you start this, Mary, you can't go back." The law office was a modest brick building on the edge of town. Mary sat across from attorney Linda Reeves, a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and a reputation for dismantling anyone who underestimated her. Linda flipped through the documents slowly, her expression growing colder. "How long have they been planning this?" she asked. "I don't know," Mary whispered. Linda closed the folder. "Mrs. Hollister, you have enough here to launch a full investigation into Mark's finances." And she tapped the forged documents. These are criminal." Mary felt her breath catch. "Criminal? Oh yes," Linda said. "Forgery, coercion, attempted financial exploitation of a senior citizen. This is not just family drama anymore. This is legal warfare. Mary pressed a hand to her chest. I never wanted a war. Sometimes, Linda said gently, war comes, whether we want it or not. That evening, Mary returned home, exhausted. She placed the box beside her chair and sank into the cushion. Her entire life felt like it had been uprooted in a matter of days. Her daughter, her son-in-law, the town she trusted, all of it shifting under her feet. But then she noticed something. Her front door was open, just slightly, enough to disturb the air. Mary froze. She stepped carefully inside the floorboards, creaking softly beneath her feet. Her kitchen light was off. The living room still. But something was wrong. She could feel it like a chill on her skin. She walked deeper in, and then she saw it. Her desk drawer was open, papers scattered, and the wooden box Henry left her. Gone. Her knees nearly buckled. She stood in the center of her living room, breath trembling, staring at the empty space where the box had been. Someone had been here. Someone new. Someone had taken the most important thing she had left of Henry. A cold pulse beat in her ears. She reached for her phone and dialed Samuel. He answered on the first ring. Mary? They were here, she whispered. The box is gone. Silence. Then Samuel said quietly, Stay where you are. I'm coming. When Samuel arrived, he walked through the house methodically. No broken windows, no forced entry, just the quiet knowledge that someone had slipped inside like a shadow. This wasn't Mark, Samuel said. This was someone who knew what they were looking for. Samuel, Mary whispered. Why is this happening to me? He placed a hand on her shoulder. Because you have something powerful, something dangerous, and someone wants it. But the box is gone, Mary said weakly. Samuel shook his head. No. The box is just a box. What matters is what you still have. He pointed to her heart. And what you remember. Mary stared at him, realization dawning. She didn't just read Henry's documents, she memorized them. Dates, names, account numbers, patterns. The truth wasn't entirely stolen. It was now living in her. The next morning, Linda Reeves called. Mary, listen carefully, she said. I pulled some strings. The court is willing to hear your case, but your daughter and Mark have filed a petition claiming you are mentally unfit. Mary felt heat flood her face. They're what? They want guardianship, Mary. They want control over everything. But I haven't done anything wrong, Mary whispered. That doesn't matter. They're playing dirty. And they have multiple people willing to testify you're losing your memory. Mary pressed back tears. But I'm not. I know, Linda said. Which is why we have to move fast. What do you need me to do? Linda's voice sharpened. I need you to be stronger than you've ever been. And Mary, I need you to be ready. Because this won't be easy. Mary closed her eyes. She could see Henry's handwriting again. If they've turned on you, it means the truth is finally surfacing. She opened her eyes, and something inside her hardened. No more trembling. No more begging. No more letting people decide her life for her. She straightened her back and spoke. I'm ready. That night, Mary sat on her porch, listening to the wind move through the trees. Silver Creek looked just as it always had, quiet, peaceful, safe. But she now understood how deeply shadows could hide beneath that stillness. She looked at the sky, at the first stars flickering awake. Henry, she whispered, I'm trying. A car engine rumbled in the distance. Mary turned. Headlights, coming up her driveway, slow, deliberate. Her pulse quickened. A black sedan stopped at the end of the path. A figure stepped out. Tall, broad shoulders, wearing a dark jacket. He didn't speak. He just stared at her. Then he lifted a hand and pointed directly at her. Mary felt the world narrow. Her breath hitched. She stepped back into the house and locked the door. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. You can't hide the truth. She dropped the phone, hands shaking. Her heart thundered. Who were these people? Why were they after her? And what did Henry uncover that frightened them this much? Mary backed away from the door, adrenaline burning through her veins. She wasn't safe. Not anymore. Her next call was to Linda. He found me. Mary whispered breathlessly. "Someone's outside." "Don't open the door," Linda ordered. "Do not speak to him. I'm calling the sheriff right now." "But Mary, listen to me. Lock every door and stay low. Help is coming." Mary slid to the floor, clutching the phone as the shadow outside her house lingered like a threat made of flesh. Minutes felt like hours. Then siren lights flashed across her windows. The figure vanished. Deputies knocked, swept the area, and stayed with her until the night thinned into dawn. But Mary didn't sleep. Not a second. Because this wasn't random. This was tactical, planned, directed. Whoever Mark had tangled himself with, they were now coming for her. And they weren't going to stop. Not until Mary Hollister was silenced. But they had underestimated her. Mary had lost her trust, her peace, her family, but she had not lost herself. And as the sun rose over Silver Creek, Mary made a decision that would change everything. She would not run, she would not hide, she would fight, and she would finish what Henry started no matter what darkness came for her. Mary stood outside the courthouse, the cold morning air biting at her cheeks as if the entire world were holding its breath. Silver Creek buzzed quietly behind her neighbors, whispering, familiar faces watching, some with pity, others with curiosity. She ignored them all. Today would decide everything. Inside courtroom 2B, she sat beside attorney Linda Reeves, gripping Henry's old wedding band that she kept in her coat pocket. It pulsed like a heartbeat, his last piece of strength she carried with her. When the judge entered, the room rose. Then the trial began. Diane and Mark sat across the aisle. Diane looked small, fragile even, her hands twisted tightly in her lap. Mark, however, sat tall, jaw clenched, eyes blazing with the confidence of a man who believed the system belonged to him. Linda began with calm precision. She introduced Mary, her age, her clean record, her stable life. Then she began unpacking the truth slowly, deliberately. She spoke about the forged documents, the coerced signatures, the rumors Mark planted. But then the opposing attorney stood. "Mrs. Hollister," he said, "you claim to be mentally sound, yet we have witnesses who say otherwise." The first witness was the nurse, Sarah. She entered trembling, eyes darting everywhere except toward Mary. "Miss Thompson," the attorney said, "do you still stand by your statement that Mrs. Hollister seemed confused during your last encounter?" Sarah swallowed hard. I suppose so." "Suppose?" Linda repeated sharply. "Or did someone tell you what to say?" Sarah froze. I don't know what you mean." Linda stepped forward. "Miss Thompson, are you aware that the pharmacy security cameras show no record of you speaking to Mrs. Hollister on the day you claimed?" Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Sarah's voice cracked. I'm so sorry. They told me she wouldn't be safe alone. They said, "Who told you?" Linda demanded. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked directly at Mark. He did. The courtroom erupted. Everything Mark built begins to fall apart. Mark shot to his feet. "She's lying." But it was too late. The truth had slipped free. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order." Next came the neighbor who had claimed Mary forgot her own address. He fumbled every answer. Under pressure, his story crumbled like wet paper. It became painfully obvious that none of these witnesses had acted out of genuine concern. They had acted out of manipulation. The prosecution stumbled. The defense tightened. And then came the moment Mary feared and needed in equal measure. "Mrs. Hollister," the judge said, "please take the stand." Mary rose slowly, knees shaking. She approached the witness chair, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. When she sat, the courtroom seemed to fall into complete stillness. "Mrs. Hollister," Linda asked softly, "can you tell the court, in your own words, why you believe your daughter and son-in-law tried to take control of your estate?" Mary took a deep breath. "Because," she said, "they thought I had no one left to speak for me." Her voice trembled but did not break. "I loved my daughter every day of her life. I helped her when she couldn't help herself. I helped Mark too. I gave them everything I could. But somewhere along the way, helping turned into expectation. And expectation turned into entitlement." A tear slid down her cheek. "When I said no just once, everything changed." She looked briefly at Diane, whose eyes lowered. They told people I was losing my memory. They tried to make the world believe I wasn't capable of living on my own. They took advantage of my grief after Henry died. They tried to take my home, my savings, my independence. They tried to take me. Mary's voice grew stronger. But I am still here. I am still whole. And I will not be erased. The judge nodded solemnly. Then it was time for cross-examination. Mark's attorney approached like a predator, testing a wounded animal. Mrs. Hollister, are you certain you're not misremembering events? Mary met his gaze evenly. I remember everything, she said, including the day Henry left me a box so I could protect myself from exactly this kind of betrayal. Mark stiffened. Diane covered her mouth. And where is this alleged box now? The attorney pressed. Mary did not flinch. Stolen. From my home. Convenient, isn't it? Linda rose immediately. Objection. Sustained, the judge said. But Mary spoke anyway, voice steady. Convenience has nothing to do with it. I don't need the box to tell the truth. I lived it. The courtroom fell silent, and that silence told Mary everything she needed to know. When closing statements finished, the judge recessed to deliberate. Mary stepped outside the courtroom, leaning against the wall as her strength drained. Diane approached quietly. Mom, she whispered. Mary didn't speak. Diane's voice broke. I didn't know Mark was doing all of this. I thought he told me you were getting worse, that you were forgetting things, that we needed to step in. Is that why you shut me out? Mary asked gently but painfully. Because he told you to? Diane wiped her eyes. I didn't want to lose him. Mary inhaled slowly. And you were willing to lose me instead? Diane collapsed into tears. Mary didn't embrace her. She simply watched, heart aching but too bruised to move forward yet. Mom, please, Diane whispered. I made a terrible mistake. It wasn't just a mistake, Mary said softly. It was a choice. And choices have consequences. The bailiff opened the courtroom door. The judge is ready. Everyone rose as Judge Patterson returned to the bench. His expression was unreadable stone carved into human form. This court has reviewed the evidence presented, he began. This includes testimony from witnesses whose credibility fell apart under questioning, along with documentation indicating potential forgery and coercion. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Diane stared at her hands. Regarding the petition to declare Mary Hollister mentally unfit, this court finds no evidence to support the claim. Mary closed her eyes, relief flooding her. Furthermore, the judge continued, the court finds significant reason to believe financial exploitation was attempted. The petition for guardianship is denied. All documents obtained by Mark Hollister are null and void. Mark's face turned the color of ash. Sheriff's deputies, the judge said without raising his voice, please escort Mr. Hollister for questioning regarding fraud, coercion, and attempted exploitation. Gasps shot through the room. Mark stood violently. You can't do this. She's lying. They're all lying. But the deputies seized him. His shouts echoed down the hallway as he was dragged away. Diane sat frozen, tears streaking silently down her cheeks. Linda placed a hand on Mary's shoulder. It's over, she whispered. Mary nodded, heart heavy but victorious. Hours later, after the courthouse emptied and night fell over Silver Creek, Mary returned to her home. She walked through each room slowly, feeling the weight lift from her chest with every step. In the kitchen, she opened the window and let the cool mountain air wash in. She brewed herself a cup of tea, steady hands, calm breath, and sat on the porch as she once did when Henry was alive. The sky stretched above her in deep indigo, dotted with stars that seemed to pulse like tiny lanterns. She whispered, Henry, I did it. A breeze rustled the wildflowers in her garden, the ones she planted for him. Mary smiled. The next morning, she dug up a small patch of earth in the yard. She planted seeds, wildflowers, of course, Henry's favorites. Her hands moved with purpose, not tiredness. For the first time in years, she wasn't living for Diane. She wasn't living for Mark. She wasn't living for what the town thought she should be. She was living for herself. Healing begins. Not forced, but earned. As she stood and brushed dirt from her palms, she felt lighter than she had in decades. Silver Creek was quiet, peaceful, safe again. She walked back to her porch, poured herself a fresh cup of tea, and whispered into the morning air, "I'm still here." She sat down, lifted the cup to her lips, and finally began the life she had always deserved. If Mary's story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to support more inspiring stories for mature audiences. Thanks for listening. Which part of the story touched you the deepest? Leave it in the comments and subscribe. We're listening. You're not alone. Your voice truly matters.